My research project was again for the pollinating insects here, and my question was, what is the difference in pollinating insect biodiversity between the hilltop valley olive groves, vineyards, forest borders and grasslands in the area? My work mainly consisted of my field work. So first of all, I walked some butterfly transects where I counted all the butterflies in a transect of 50 meters and at 5 times per area. So that was 250 meters per area of interest. Then I did the sweep netting, that's again 50 meters times 5, where I used my butterfly net to make 8s in front of me and catch all of the insects that were in the vegetation on the ground. Then I did some moth trapping, so I had an LED bucket which I placed in the different areas, and the bluish purplish light that was hung above it will attract the moths in the area of about 200 meters of an area. And then in the morning, at about 4 o'clock in the morning, I checked it and photographed all the moths that I got. Then vegetation biodiversity, so I looked at the difference in vegetation between the different areas and how many species can I found, but that's the area that they cover and how is that biodiversity correlating to the insect biodiversity. And then lots and lots of sorting, because with the sweep netting I cut so many grass seeds, it takes us a whole day to sort out one area just to get the grass seeds out, and then I even had to sort all the insects, identify them, so it took a lot of work, but it was definitely worth it. The first area was the hilltop olive groves, so the higher areas, it's a bit dry there, and I'll show you a bit in the results why that compromises some species, but still lots of vegetation, lots of grasses, but also orchids were here. Then the olive groves, this grass looks a bit brownish, but there's lots of flowers in between. The grass wasn't as widespread, it was mostly little herbs and flowers, and also some orchids, just different species. Then the vineyards, it was probably the most interesting area for me, because we don't have vineyards in the Netherlands, but we've got the most species in the vineyards, which is awesome, definitely. The vegetation between the rows of grapes consisted mostly of grasses again, but also lots of clovers and little crawling species of plants which have tiny flowers, and these tiny flowers are really important for most small wasps and bees, so I'll show it later. Then the forest border, it's just behind the castle, is a large forest that's comprised of like leafy greens, but also nettles and bushes, and then again some flowers that are growing on the bushes. And last but not least, the grassland. This is kind of an olive grove, but it's not mowed as often, which was nice to see. What will the vegetation do when there's minimal interception by humans? And here the grasses were everywhere. It was 90% grasses, some tiny plants, some clovers, but they didn't really have the energy or the sunlight to get above the grasses. And then there were many little trees, little shrubs, so it was way more hardy to get through, less flowers. So that was interesting to see. Then the results, lots of numbers, I'll show you. Again, the vineyards, you can see wasps 200, flies 400, beetles 90, let's see, bees 90. There were many species here, and this is just the count, not the different specimens of the different species. I'll have to identify some more, but this is the results so far. Then what was really interesting was the flies in the vineyards. 1,400 flies in the vineyards. That's probably gale flies, so they live on the plants. But also just flies going through. It's nice and warm between the rocks there, and again lots of flowers to pollinate. So that was really interesting. Yeah, grassland had many wasp species, probably parasitic wasps, because there are some butterflies that have their host plants on some grasses. I think most of those wasps were parasitic, so tiny wasps that lay their eggs in other animals. And then not much of a difference between the hilltop and the valley olive groves. The tiny bit of difference you can see here is probably because of the lack of water in the hilltop and the greener grass and more water availability in the valley. Forest borders, yeah, lots of flies. Not sure why, but the biodiversity there is the least, which is as expected. So that was the results. My advice for Charlotte is actually, she's doing great. If you look at the olive groves and the vineyards, so the ones the plots that we use, the biodiversity is higher there than in comparison with the forests and the wild grasslands. Because if you don't mow, only the grass will, get up and move around because they're so fast growing. So yeah, the tiny orchids and low vegetation like clovers, those really need some more sunlight, some more water, and it's really doing great, especially in the vineyards, so that's really awesome. I heard you mow there about every few months, so not as much as some would. There's no pesticides or anything, so it's really going great, and it proves your point in that it's definitely possible to do some agricultural within nature and have it combined. So that's awesome to see. And the most results we saw was indeed the difference between wet or dry. Above hilltops the biodiversity was a bit low, but that's as expected. Yeah, my only advice is watch out for the orchids and special species. I'll send you a list of some species that are really special and where they were found. But other than that, it was awesome.